Welcome to Christine's Faith Over Fear.
Well, happy, thriving Thursday, everyone, where fear loses its voice and faith takes the lead. Welcome to Christine's Faith Over Fear podcast. I am your host, Christine Bailey, and let's get started. So, I have a good topic for us tonight, you guys. So, tonight we are talking about how not everyone in your life is assigned to your life. I'm going to say that again. Not everyone in your life is assigned to your life. Did you assign them or did God assign them? That is the question to think about through this episode on tonight. Did you assign them or did God assign them? Shout out to my sister-in-law, Gloria Phillips, and to my friend, one of my dearest friends, Miss Rhoda. Thank you guys so much for joining us on tonight. And to all of my other LinkedIn family, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, welcome, welcome, welcome. I appreciate you. So today we are talking about something that requires discernment, healing, and honesty. Not everyone in our life is assigned to our life. I'm going to say that again. Not everyone in our life is assigned to our life. Let's take a look at Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23. Watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life. Guarding your heart, that includes relationships. Everyone who enters into your life should not have full access. And I'm going to say that one again as well. Not everyone who enters into your life should have full access. And there is, a reason behind that. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that on tonight. So I'm just asking you guys to give me a little grace on tonight. Guarding your heart does not mean building walls. It means using wisdom about who you allow close to your spirit. One of the reasons why I chose this topic is because this is something that I have currently been going through, not only as far as relationships go, but friendships as well. And I think all of us at some point in time in life has experienced this, or may be currently experiencing this right now, like I am. Your heart is the place where, number one, your faith lives. Your emotions are shaped, your trust is developed, and your purpose grows. More importantly, faith and peace. And like I said on last week, we have to guard our hearts, our minds, our joy, and our peace. That is, for me, a necessity. It is an absolute necessity. When we allow the wrong people close to our heart, they have a way of influencing us. how we feel about ourselves, maybe even how we see God, our peace, and our direction. Guarding our heart means that we pray about relationships. You observe the fruit and you listen to discernment that can only come from God instead of allowing emotions to make our decisions. Because a lot of times, a lot of us, many of us will go off of emotions. And we all know that when it comes to emotions, emotions are very tricky. It's like kind of like how the wind blows, or whether you woke up on the right side of the bed or not. It's just an up and down thing. And so we cannot count on our emotions. So we must look to God for discernment. Now, you can love people and still protect your peace. That is very important to remember. You can love people and still protect your peace. You can be kind and still set boundaries. Boundaries are very important for all of us. You can care and still use wisdom. Guarding your heart means you do not allow just anyone to speak into your life, shape your thinking, or influence your decisions. And we have to be very careful about that. Because everyone who enters, once again, should not have full access. There are levels of relationships. Some people are acquaintances, some are friends, some are mentors, some are assignments, and unfortunately, some are temporary. But we sometimes give full access too quickly. We often share personal struggles. We start trusting way too soon. And we start becoming emotionally dependent. And I just want to say, have you ever had that friend or family member or coworker? Me and my sister-in-law talked about this not too long ago, that you pour into them all the time. And no matter how much you pour into them, it kind of seems like either A, they're not getting it, or B, they're choosing not to get it. And I had to ask God, so what do I do? Because I'm the type of person where I try to, be kind and have compassion for everyone. But there comes a time where I started to realize that the conversations that I was having were draining me. And I mean, when I would get off of the phone with this person, I would be absolutely drained. And then another thing that I noticed was that it started messing with my peace. The conversations that we would have started messing with my peace. And if anyone knows me by now, my peace is my main priority. After everything that I have been through, My peace is my main priority. And I would talk to my sister in law about it, and I would tell her, I said, I just don't understand, because it's like I keep pouring into this person, and it's like I felt like I was just being used as someone that they could just, vent to. And don't get me wrong, that's okay, because we all need that. We all need that person that we can vent to. But then also, you want to be mindful of the fact, are they even listening to you? Or, as I like to say, are they just using you as a rug, as a piece of furniture? And that's how I started to feel. And I can tell you that I don't like that feeling. I do not like feeling that way, because it's like, to me, I see it as we are supposed to be a blessing to others. And as we are to be a blessing to others, you would think after a certain length of time that the person would get it, and that you would be able to see that they are getting it. But then I started to realize that this person has some issues, and they are very much drama filled. And if you know me, I don't do drama. I don't like drama. So, we have to keep that in mind when we are trying to be a blessing to others. And that's what made me have to start asking God first, does this person belong in my life? Did I orchestrate this? Or, God, did you bring them into my life? Because there are times when God brings people into our lives, and they still don't want to hear what we have to say. But a lot of times it's because they're not ready, or they're afraid. That's completely different than someone just using you, as I would like to say, a piece of furniture. And that's why we need to ask God for discernment and be very, very careful about who we are assigning to us, because maybe they were not assigned to us at all. And if so, maybe, just maybe, it was a temporary thing. Maybe it was not a permanent thing, because I've learned within this last year that not all people are. And that's okay. I can now say that I'm good with that. Very, very good with that. When we give people full access that are not aligned or not sent by God, they tend to influence our emotions, our decisions. It messes with our faith, and once again, our peace. And that's something that, those things, we have to protect those things. It's all a part of who we are and why God has chosen us. So be very, very aware, and at that level of access should be earned through consistency, trust, and alignment. Not given because of loneliness, history, or comfort. And a lot of times for us, it's one or the two. It's either loneliness or comfort. And that's not good. I'm learning that. And so I think this is a very important topic, and it is spot on for a lot of us, because sometimes we don't even recognize it. And I did not recognize it until I heard a pastor preaching about it. And I studied up on it and I thought, wow, wow. Just because someone enters your life, it does not mean they were given authority in your life. Just because someone has entered your life does not mean they were given authority in your life. And that's where the discernment comes in at, and that's very important, like I said. Now, there is a difference between God assigned relationships and self assigned relationships. And I want to dig a little bit deeper into those because there is a difference. Sometimes we assign people ourselves because of loneliness, once again, fear of being alone, emotional attachment, a history with someone, or ignoring red flags. And that is very, very important because a lot of times we miss those red flags that God has given to us. Because, God warns us. And He does that for our own protection. He does that. And so we need to be more vigilant and more aware when it is coming from God and to listen. Sometimes we may be talking too much and we miss what God is trying to tell us, or someone that God may send to us with that warning sign, and we just ignore it. So warning signs, that's something that we do not want to ignore, because a lot of times they come with a price. They come with a price. So God assigned relationships. God assigned relationships bring alignment, growth, and peace. They don't mean the relationship is perfect, but they move you closer to God and your purpose, not farther away. And that's another thing. If you feel like you're being moved farther away, then trust me, that is not a God-assigned relationship. Characteristics of God-assigned relationships: they encourage our faith. They respect our boundaries. And they also bring clarity, not confusion. Because God doesn't do confusion. There is no confusion in God's world. So that's another big red flag. If there's a lot of confusion, yeah, I'm learning, you guys. I am truly, truly learning. They challenge you in love. They produce peace in your spirit. And they are consistent, not chaotic. God doesn't do chaos. God doesn't do drama. And so that's another thing that we can ask ourselves when we have people in our life. I like to ask myself, how is this person? How is this blessing me? How is this helping me? Because to me, when it comes to a relationship, it should be a two-way thing, not one way. It should be a two-way. God-assigned relationships, they tend to stretch us, but they will never pull us away from who God is calling us to be. Never, never, ever. They stretch us, but they do not pull us away from God at all. Not at all. Now, self-assigned relationships, on the other hand, they often come from emotion instead of discernment. We may assign someone, like I said, because of loneliness, history, attraction, or fear of letting go. That's another one, the fear of letting go. Characteristics of a self-assigned relationship is constant emotional confusion, feeling drained instead of strengthened, ignoring red flags, compromising our values. Wow. Pulling us away from prayer or peace, repeating unhealthy cycles, and feeling anxious instead of settled. And I can tell you that those characteristics right there for a self-assigned relationship, for me, is spot on. It is spot on. So when I tell you that, when I pick these topics to help us learn, and I say us because they help me as well, because this is, so important to how we live, our peace. These relationships often require us to force what God never intended. I'm going to say that again. These relationships, these self-assigned relationships, often require us to force what God never intended. Whether it is an actual relationship between spouses or friendships. If God never intended it, guess what? It will not work. I don't care how hard we try. But if it is not of God, it will not work. Self-assigned relationships are often maintained by effort, not peace. They really are. They are assigned by effort and not peace. And the key difference is that God-assigned relationships brings peace with purpose, while self-assigned relationships bring attachment without alignment. God-assigned, peace with purpose. Self-assigned, attachment without alignment. When you assign someone, we try to hold it together. When God assigns someone, He does the holding. He holds it together. So my take on that is that if it is assigned by God, then we don't have to force it. It should not be forced. It should be evident. As they say, my dad used to say, the proof is in the pudding. The proof is in the pudding right there, friends. When God assigns someone, He holds it together. It's not something that, we have to chase after, nothing that we have to force. Because with God, nothing is forced. Absolutely nothing is forced with God. And we have to really, think about that. We really should. Let's take a look at 1 Corinthians 14:33. And it reads, "For God, who is the source of their prophesying, is not a God of confusion and disorder, but of peace and order, as is the practice in all the churches of the saints," God's people. You know, when there is no peace, it makes it hard for you to function. When there is always confusion, chaos, you're just emotionally drained. And that's not good because that's not how God wants any of us. Those characteristics are not assigned by God because God is love, joy, peace, compassion, gentleness, kindness. God is all of that. So, all of these negative characteristics, we already know those come from the enemy. They most definitely do not come from God. And then we have those repeated cycles. And a lot of times we choose people, like I said earlier, because of being lonely. And we just invite people in, and we need to be really, really careful about who we let in. That's like what we watch on TV and anything else. We have to be vigilant about that because our lives matter. So it's kind of like what we put into our body, what we bring into our lives, it matters. It really does matter. And when God removes people, a lot of times we tend to get upset. And I know I experienced that, a couple of years ago. And then God had to show me the reason why He removed that person. Removal is not always rejection. God protects our purpose. Some people cannot go, and I want us to listen to this very carefully. Some people cannot go into our next season. Point blank, period. Some people cannot go into our next season. Sometimes God removes people because they were assigned to a season, not our destiny. I'm going to say that again. Sometimes God will remove people because they were assigned to a season and not our destiny. And that's true. That is so, so true. And when I look back and I reflect on people that have came into my life and left out of my life, that really hits, and it really makes sense to me now more than ever. Because now I realize that those people were not a part of my destiny, that they were only in my life for a season. And so with that, I say, thank you, God. Thank you for the season that they were in my life. But that season has expired, and so now it's time to move on. And sometimes it's not comfortable, because you get so used to people. You get used to people. But I'm learning as I am growing and getting older and wiser, the things that God does, what He does for our protection. never to harm us, because God would never harm us. But because of his unconditional love for each and every one of us. For each and every one of us. Some people are not a part of our journey. They are a part of our journey, but they are not a part of our destination. And God will allow certain individuals into our lives sometimes to teach us something, to strengthen us, to reveal areas where we may need healing, to prepare us for the next season. Wow. Me and my producer just talked about along this line right here, to prepare us for the next season. God never does anything just to be doing it. He always has a reason. Always has a reason. So, but that does not mean that they are meant to walk with us into our purpose. When someone is not assigned to your destiny, they may not understand your growth. They may actually resist your change. They may be comfortable with the old version of you, not being able to accept the new version that God has put in you. They may unintentionally pull you backward. And that's something that we have to be careful with, because that can happen. But I always say that a person will only do what we allow them to do. And that, I believe, is where boundaries come in at. We have to set boundaries. I don't care who it is. It is very, very important that we set boundaries. Like we set boundaries for our children. We should set boundaries for spouses. We should set boundaries for friends, neighbors, co-workers. We should set boundaries. So that is very, very important. As we grow spiritually, emotionally, and mentally, not everyone will grow with you. And that's okay. Because not everyone is on the same, God doesn't have all of us on that same path. And that's okay. It doesn't make them a bad person. It's just not what God has purposed and planned for our life. Some people were assigned to our development, but not our destiny. Some people were assigned to our development, but not our destiny. And that's okay. And I am not just speaking of marital relationships. I am speaking of friendships, co-workers, and anyone else, I would say other than our children, because God blessed us with our children. They are all a blessing from God. So they are excluded. But I believe everyone else is included. So, sometimes we try to carry people into a future God never prepared for them. Excuse me. Sorry about that, you guys. And when we do that, it creates tension, confusion, and emotional weight. But when God is guiding our destiny, He will also align the right people to walk with us. And I'm a living witness of that. God will always put the right people in alignment with us. Always. Let's take a look at Isaiah 58:11. And the Lord I don't know what this is. It just popped up on my computer. Okay. And the Lord will continually guide you and satisfy your soul in scorched and dry places, and give strength to your bones, and you will be like a watered garden, and like a spring of water whose waters do not fail. That means He guides our steps, our decisions, and even our relationships. You know, we serve a mighty God, an awesome, awesome God. And I am just thankful, 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 thankful that we have a God that loves us unconditionally. You know, not only does He protect us, but He makes provisions for us. He guides us, He directs us. You know, we can't get any better than that, you guys. We really can't. We can't get any better than that. And you know, and I just want to say that peace comes when we release what God is releasing. That's where the peace comes in at. When we are able to release what God is releasing, meaning what God is saying to let go of, then we need to be obedient to His word, no matter how uncomfortable it may make us feel, because God is our joy, you know. And so we have to really think about that. We have to think about that. Let's take a look at Isaiah 58:11. Oh, yeah, my bad. I guess I'm trying to read it all over again, huh? And it reads, Peace I live with you. I leave with you. I'm sorry. My perfect peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, do I give to you. Do not let your heart be troubled, nor let it be afraid. Let my perfect peace calm you in every circumstance, and give you courage and strength for every challenge. That's powerful, you guys. That is very, very powerful right there. Sometimes we hold on to people, situations, or seasons long after God has already begun to move us forward. Releasing what God is releasing means trusting His direction, even when it's uncomfortable. It means recognizing that not everything we lose is meant to be recovered. Some things are meant to be surrendered so new growth can begin. When God is releasing something, you may notice the peace you once felt is no longer there. Doors begin to close. Communication becomes strained. You feel led in a different direction. And your spirit senses that it's time to move on. Because a lot of times our spirit will sense that. And that's a red flag. All of those are red flags, and we tend to ignore those. These are not always signs of failure. They can be signs of transition. Holding on when God is letting go often creates emotional exhaustion, confusion, and delay, because that's also being disobedient when we're trying to hold on to something that God has said and has shown us in relationships, except our children, that it's time to let go of. Even though it may be uncomfortable, but it's something that we must do. So it is better to be obedient than to be disobedient. So if you feel led to support our ministry, details are in the description below. Your support helps us continue bringing faith-filled encouragement each week. Before I do my final reflection and close tonight, we are going to go to a quick commercial break, and we will be right back. Stay tuned.
God can heal, deliver, restore, and renew. When you take God out of it, you leave the door wide open for the enemy to come in. Mustard Seed Faith to Unshakable Faith and No God, No Peace by author Christine Bailey are available now on Amazon.
All right, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in with me on tonight, for your love and support, and I just want to say, releasing is not giving up. I'm going to say that again. Releasing is not giving up. It is giving God permission to lead. It is giving God permission to lead. And I just want to leave that with you all on tonight. I thank you for joining Christine's Faith Over Fear podcast, where fear loses its voice and faith takes the lead. Until next time, keep choosing faith over fear. Be blessed. Good night.
Thanks for watching Christine's Faith Over Fear.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you next week.